The Strings of Illusion, A Harlequin's Journey. I gotta say that title really grabbed my attention. Sounds like a fantasy novel or something. We're diving into a YouTube video essay with that same name and an excerpt from an art book. They're both talking about this really interesting painting.
Oh, yeah, visual art and philosophy, and a touch of Zen all in one image. Well, let's see what we can find.
So this painting is called Marionette, and it's pretty intense when you look at it. Picture a harlequin puppet, you know, the one with the diamond costume. He's kneeling in this huge empty desert.
Uh-huh.
And get this, above the puppet, there are these two giant hands pulling the strings. Makes you think, who's really in control here?
Immediately grabs you, and you start asking those questions, right? Control and influence. And even the setting itself. Why a desert? What do the strings even mean? That's where the video essay comes in. It's got a really interesting perspective. It says that the puppet, it represents humanity. All of us, we're bound by our desires and anxieties and all these pressures from the outside, like those metaphorical strings tugging at us.
So we're all puppets then?
Well, that's the idea the video is playing with. We might think we're the ones making all the decisions, but then you see these hands, these unknown forces, and they remind us that maybe we're not as in charge as we think we are.
Okay, so that makes sense. But what about that desert in the background? It's so vast and empty. What's the meaning of that?
Well, the video explains it as like a visual way to show shunyata. It's a really important idea in Zen philosophy. Think about that huge desert. It's kind of a visual reminder that everything changes all the time. Just like sand dunes shifting in the wind. Everything is in flux. Our situations, our feelings, they never really stay the same, do they?
Right.
And that's shunyata, recognizing that everything is constantly changing. And that can actually help us let go of that need to control every little thing.
So letting go of control, that's how we handle this always changing world around us. But where do we even start to loosen those strings, those metaphorical strings?
That's where both the video and the art book introduce a connection to the I Ching, specifically hexagram 29, the abysmal water.
Oh, wow, I Ching. Okay, so how does that relate to the painting?
This hexagram, it's all about those inner struggles we face. Like, how do you deal with uncertainty? How do you adapt to whatever life throws at you? Imagine yourself in this massive, deep body of water. To survive, you got to adapt, got to be flexible, got to find a way to stay afloat, right? The hexagram, it stresses that same kind of resilience, that surrender in the face of life's challenges.
Okay, I think I'm following you. But how does that tie back to our marionette painting?
Well, you see, the puppet can only move because of those strings. And that's kind of like us, right? We depend on things outside of ourselves. We always look for answers and stability from the outside world. It's easy to feel like we're at the mercy of these external forces, just like the puppet being controlled by those hands.
So we're admitting that we often feel pulled in different directions by different things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we've got that huge desert, that endless sky, and it represents something way bigger than us.
Absolutely. The desert and that sky above, visually they represent the Tao, that boundless natural order of the universe. And like the hexagram reminds us, be like water. Go with the flow. Don't fight against it.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection here. But if we let go of the strings, how do we find our own way? How do we, I don't know, step into being in charge of our own lives?
That's where the art book Zen and the Art of Enlightenment Volume 1 really dives deep into what that harlequin figure means. Traditionally harlequins, they're like jesters or clowns, performers who hide behind masks and play different roles.
That makes me think about all the different faces we put on in our lives. Like we're wearing masks to fit in, playing different parts in our families, at work, everywhere.
Exactly. We're always adapting, always changing how we act depending on who we're with and what we're doing. And that's what makes the harlequin such a powerful image in this painting. It shows that contrast between what people see and what's really underneath.
So it's like we're all acting in this grand play of life. But where's the real us in all of this?
And here's where it gets really interesting. The art book connects this idea to surrealist artists, guys like Salvador Dali and René Magritte.
Oh, I love those guys. Their art is wild, like dreams and distorted reality. And how does that fit in with this marionette painting?
Well, think about what surrealism is all about. It's exploring the subconscious, messing with how we see reality. The art book suggests that marionette does something similar. It makes us question what's real, how much control we really have, even the nature of our own existence.
Wait, hold on. Let me wrap my head around that. So you're saying this painting with the harlequin and the strings, it's telling us to look deeper beyond the surface, beyond those assumptions we make about ourselves and the world.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's pushing us to confront these illusions, to question if we're really just puppets dancing to someone else's tune, or if we can actually be the ones controlling our own destiny.
Wow. This is already making me think about my own life in a whole new way.
And you know what's fascinating? Both the video and the art book, they both agree that maybe the path to real freedom is letting go of control.
So it's not about fighting those strings, but maybe understanding them, even accepting them.
Exactly. It sounds kind of contradictory, but both sources say that by letting go of that need to micromanage our lives, we actually become more free, more connected to everything around us.
This is blowing my mind. But how do we actually do that? How do we let go when those strings feel so real, so ingrained in everything we do?
Well, let's look closer at the painting itself. You've got that deep blue sky and the pale empty desert, right? It really makes the puppet seem isolated, alone. It's like he's been put in this vast universe all alone with those strings and the hands that control him.
And the hands themselves, they're this pale yellow, almost ghostly against that intense blue. Yeah, it really shows that power dynamic, doesn't it?
For sure, those visual details, they bring us face to face with that feeling of being controlled, of being manipulated by forces we don't understand, both inside and outside of us. But remember, the video also talked about Lao Tzu's wisdom from the I Ching. He talks about surrendering to the Tao, surrendering to the natural order.
It's like by letting go, by accepting our place in this grand scheme of things, we can find some harmony, some peace.
And that's the paradox, right? By surrendering to those forces that seem to control us, we might actually discover the path to real freedom.
This deep dive is already taking us to some deep places. We're talking about control, the illusion of freedom, and even questioning our reality.
And this is just the beginning. There's so much more to uncover, more layers to this painting and what it's trying to tell us.
I can't wait to see where we go next. Before we move on, I'm still thinking about that harlequin and the idea of masks. Do we ever really take off those masks, or are we always putting on a show for someone even if we don't see them?
Yeah, that's a question that really fits in with everything this artwork is exploring. It's like that harlequin costume itself. With those diamond shapes and all those bright colors, it's like a visual representation of all the different roles and masks we wear in our lives. We're always changing, putting on a different act, depending on the situation, just like that video essay said.
It reminds me of how I catch myself acting differently around different people. Is that like the inner harlequin in all of us?
That's a really interesting point, and the essayist cleverly connects it back to that idea of adaptability, like the abysmal water hexagram. Remember, we talked about being like water flowing with those constant changes in life.
But if we're always adapting, always putting on a different mask, do we ever really know our true selves? Like, where does authenticity fit in with all this talk about control and surrender?
That's what I love about these sources. They don't give us a simple answer. Instead, they want us to really think about these questions, to look inside ourselves and figure out how we feel about control, authenticity, and those masks we choose to wear.
So it's not about finding a right or wrong answer. It's more about that journey of self-discovery.
Exactly. And remember what the video essay emphasized being present, like really experiencing each moment as it happens. Maybe by letting go of that constant need to control everything and just focusing on the now, that's how we start to connect with who we truly are.
Like that saying, let go or be dragged. The more we fight against things, the harder it gets.
Exactly. But when we surrender to the flow, when we accept the things we can't change, that's when we find peace, maybe even joy.
I'm getting that part. But what about those actual strings in the painting? What do they symbolize on a deeper level?
Both sources have some interesting interpretations. The video essay says they represent all those things that pull us in different directions. Desires, fears, pressures from the outside. It's like we're puppets reacting to these invisible forces, and sometimes we don't even realize it.
Right, but the art book goes even further, right? It suggests that those strings can also be internal. Like our own thoughts and beliefs can be the strings controlling our actions.
Absolutely. That's a great observation. So it's not just outside forces manipulating us.
Right.
We're also influenced by the stories we tell ourselves, those limiting beliefs we hold. All of that adds to those invisible strings holding us back.
Wow, that's powerful. So it's like a double whammy. The pressures from outside and then those inner voices, they can be just as controlling. No wonder we feel lost and confused sometimes.
But there's good news here. Awareness is the first step to breaking free. Once we see those strings, both the internal and external ones, we can start to loosen their hold on us.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we start untangling those metaphorical strings and take back control of our lives?
The video essay suggests a few things we can try. One is mindfulness, paying attention to our thoughts and feelings without judging them, just observing. When we become aware of those inner strings, those thought patterns and beliefs, then we can start to question them. Are they helping us or are they holding us back?
And the art book, it talks about accepting interconnectedness, right? Like realizing we're not just separate individuals, but part of this big web of life.
Exactly. When we shift our focus from individual control to a sense of shared responsibility, we might find a different kind of freedom, a freedom that comes from understanding our place in this big tapestry of existence.
So the more we try to control everything, the less control we actually have. But when we go with the flow, when we trust in something bigger than ourselves, then we open ourselves up to a world of possibilities.
And the beautiful thing is, these different paths, they're not separate. We can practice mindfulness while also embracing our interconnectedness. It's all about finding that balance between acting on our own and surrendering to those forces that are out of our hands.
It's like a dance. This constant back and forth between wanting control and learning to let go, between chasing what we want and respecting the needs of everyone around us.
That's a perfect way to put it. And just like the harlequin who's a master of disguise, we have choices too. We can choose how we show up in the world, what masks we wear. But we can do it with awareness and intention. We can move through life with grace, adapting to those changes while still being true to who we are.
This is so much more than just an analysis of some painting. It's a whole philosophy of life right here in front of us.
And that's the power of art, isn't it? It makes us think about these big questions, explore what it means to be human, and connect to something bigger than ourselves.
So if we're not just puppets, if we're not just dancing to someone else's tune, then how do we become the ones holding the strings? How do we take control?
That's a question worth pondering, and it's something we'll keep exploring as we dig deeper into this world of the strings of illusion.
I don't want this conversation to end, but we got to keep moving, see where this journey takes us.
All right, we're back, and I'm ready to keep untangling these strings of illusion. Before we got sidetracked talking about masks and all that, we were discussing how to become the hands that guide our own path. I mean, it seems like a contradiction, but if we're caught up in all these strings, how can we possibly take control?
That's where the YouTube video essay brings up a really powerful image. It tells us to picture the marionette actually surrendering to the strings.
Surrendering? Hold on a second. I thought the whole point was to break free. It sounds like we're doing the opposite. That's the cool thing about this whole exploration. It makes us reconsider what freedom really means. The video compares this to a concept from Taoism Wu Wei. It's often translated as effortless action or non-doing. Basically, it's not about forcing things or imposing our will on the world. It's more about aligning ourselves with how the universe naturally flows.
So instead of fighting against the strings, we should be dancing with them, like find a way to move with them instead of resisting.
Exactly. And here's where that connection to surrealism from the art book becomes really important. Think about those mind-bending paintings by Dali and Magritte. They mess with our perceptions, challenge us to see beyond what we think is real.
And marionette kind of does that too, doesn't it? Makes us question all these things we take for granted. Control, free will, even the nature of reality itself.
You got it. The art book argues that by accepting the ambiguity, the mystery in this artwork and in life, we might actually gain a much deeper understanding.
So instead of getting caught up in controlling every little outcome, maybe we need to step back and acknowledge that we don't see everything. Maybe that's the real key to freedom.
That's a really insightful point. By letting go of control, maybe we open ourselves up to a reality that's way more interconnected, always changing, and much bigger than our limited human minds can even comprehend.
I think I'm starting to get it. When we give up that need to control every little thing, we tap into a different kind of power, the power to adapt, to change with the flow of life.
And that's exactly the message that comes through in both the video and the art book. True freedom isn't about dominating the things around us, but about realizing how connected we are to everything and aligning ourselves with the natural order of the universe.
Okay, that all makes sense in theory, but how do we actually live that way? It's one thing to talk about surrender and acceptance, but when we're facing real challenges in our lives, those strings can feel like they're pulling us apart.
That's where mindfulness comes in. Remember how the video essay stressed being present in the moment, paying attention to our thoughts, emotions, and even our physical sensations without judging them? When we cultivate that kind of awareness, we start to notice when we're holding on too tightly, resisting the natural flow of things.
And in those moments, we can choose to let go, just relax our grip and let things happen naturally.
Exactly. It's not about being passive or giving up on our goals. It's more about finding that balance between putting in effort and going with the flow, between taking action and accepting what is.
It's like we're still the ones dancing, but we're learning to dance with those strings, to move to the rhythm of the universe instead of trying to force our own beat on it.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And like the harlequin who's a master of disguise, we have choices too. We can choose how we present ourselves to the world, what masks we wear, but we can do it consciously.
So we can be both the puppet and the puppeteer. Embrace the paradox.
Exactly. And that's the real message that Marionette is sending us, to explore ourselves deeply, confront the illusions that hold us back, and ultimately find the freedom that comes from surrendering to the dance of life.
It feels like we've barely scratched the surface of this amazing artwork. There's so much more to think about, so much to unpack.
And that's what makes a deep dive like this so rewarding. It's not about finding all the answers, but about sparking curiosity, inspiring those moments of realization, and encouraging you, our listener, to keep exploring these ideas on your own.
So as we wrap up today's episode, we'll leave you with this. Take a moment to think about those strings in your own life. You know, those habits, beliefs, pressures from the outside, all those things that influence your actions. Ask yourself, where am I clinging to control? Where can I relax a little and let myself go with the flow of life?
Remember, the path to freedom isn't a straight line. It's more like a dance, a constant give and take between control and surrender, effort and ease. Embrace the paradox, and you might just discover all the amazing possibilities that are within you.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep dancing with the strings of illusion.
And who knows, you might just find yourself becoming the hands that guide your own extraordinary journey.